Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're here. We broadcast 2 hours Monday through Friday from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains on Genesis Communications Network. John Harmon's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and live with us from Australia is Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am doing very, very well, and I trust you are as well.
Yep, I'm doing just fine. I've got my cup of tea and I've got my fireplace lit. And so I'm warm and I'm, slightly caffeinated and hydrated, and so I'm feeling good.
As you said, you're warm. I was outside this morning here at the farmhouse, and I was taking a look around at the grass. As you know, I'm a grass farmer. Some people might say I raise cows, but I really raise grass, and the cows control the grass for us. And the grass is green. I was out yesterday walking around the fields with Mrs. Finelli, just looking at the grass and seeing how well it's doing, and it looked like it was starting to turn green yesterday. This morning, because of the warm weather, it's getting greener and greener, and it's really growing, and it doesn't know what to do because this is the winter. We're in the winter here in this part of the world. I think the climate is confused. I really do, and the poor plants, they can't get up and move. They're stuck where they are. Grass plants and trees are stuck where they are. And are you seeing the same kind of thing where these weather anomalies are confusing plants and trees?
Well, we've certainly had a wetter summer, or a wetter 2016 was the wettest year in a generation, in about 60 years. Where we are, it's kind of hard to judge because I've been doing so many amendments to the catchment of this property, and looking, and every single one of them looking to keep water in the landscape. And we live in a semi-arid climate, so normally by this time of year, this place would be absolutely not one speck of green anywhere. But it's hard to tell if we are still getting little green patches and little bits of grass trying to grow, but it's hard to tell whether that is the exceptionally wet year that we had last year, or whether it's that my catchment management efforts are actually working, or if it's the messed up seasons, or if it's all three. And I would tend to think that it's actually all three, but my farm is probably a little bit greener than all the other surrounding farms. And we had a neighbour's dog come through a while back, and one by one killed all of our sheep and goats. We don't have any sheep and goats at the moment, but we still have the sheep dogs. And hopefully sometime in the future we will get more ungulates onto this property, more sheep, more goats, and maybe a cow or two. So we're keeping the sheep dogs for that reason, because once you've trained them, they're trained forever. They keep that knowledge. But we have a horse, and I have only just started to feed out to the horse, and that was probably about a week or two ago, so it's February. And in any normal year, I would have been feeding out to the horse probably around about from the beginning of October. So he's just been eating the grass that's been on the property, and he's been, up until now, doing quite well.
You're mentioning a horse. You know, we're in our neck of the woods. Horses are becoming a liability because you have to feed them. You have to feed them something, grass, and that would be grass that cows might eat. So horses are almost free here, almost free, and sometimes they are free. We've been offered a total, in the last several years, we've been offered a total of, I believe, 5 horses, 3 one time and 2 another time. And the question is, we'd love to give these horses a good home, but how do we feed them when we have trouble feeding our own cows? It's a problem. It really is. Is it similar in Australia, or are horses more valuable there?
Well, you know something, coincidentally, there is this magazine I buy sometimes. It's put out by, actually he started out bootmaking. He's passed on now, but his company is still around. It's called R.M. Williams, okay? And he puts out a magazine, and it's all about the outback. And I was looking through this magazine, and it had an article on, funnily enough, Black Angus cattle. And this little farm of about 20 or 30,000 acres was running 3,000 head of Black Angus cattle, and they said that they used horses as a tool to manage their cattle. So they actually did the old-fashioned thing of going out with their horses. Here in Australia, we have a special breed of horse that most of the stations use, and it's called the Australian stock horse. And actually, it's a bit of a mishmash of breeding of, thoroughbred and, some old British breeds and this sort of thing that all got bred together into something that's a horse that could turn on a dime. And it's not a quarter horse, but it's used for the same reason. They use horses to manage their cattle, and they have noticed that when slaughter time comes, when the time comes for their cattle to go to the abattoir, the slaughterhouse, that they comment that the meat is so beautiful. And, it's because the horses have never frightened the cows. A lot of these big stations, they use motorcycles, they use airplanes, they use helicopters and all sorts, depending on the size of the station, to muster the cattle. And the cattle, every time they go into the yards, they know that it's bad, and so they're frightened, they're knocking around, they're kicking around, their eyes go big and roll back, and you can see the whites and all. These cattle, they walk themselves into the yard because the cow doesn't see the horse as a threat, okay? So it sees it as the herd leader leading it on to a better pasture, which in nature, because a horse is slightly taller than a cow, it can see further, and if the horse is not frightened, then the cow's going to be a lot calmer. That's what they use horses for. And there is still, around here, there is still a livestock mustering industry where there are teams of people that you can hire if you want to move your livestock along the public road system, okay? And these musterers typically, these mustering companies typically employ people on horseback. to do the mustering. And they have a system here in Australia that was set up very early on called stock routes. And you can drive your livestock along the stock route basically from all the way from Victoria to Queensland. So that's, some of these stock routes have become highways, but some of them are still just flat-out stock routes. And in Australia, they nickname it the long paddock. And when a farmer's having a bad year, often he will get his family members out, he'll get the horses, and he'll saddle up, and he'll actually take his stock onto the long paddock. And he moves them a bit along each day, and they eat the grass that's growing along the stock route. And they have to pay, of course, the extortionists and charge a small fee for this. It might be like something like 50 cents a head a day or something, which if you've got a big herd, that can add up. Like if you've got like 300, 500, 1,000 cattle, that can certainly add up. But it's probably cheaper than buying them hay.
Well, a roll of hay here is about $30, and it weighs about 1,000 pounds. So, and we'd be feeding about 30 pounds a day per cow.
Yeah.
So it actually, fresh grass for 50 cents a day sounds like a good deal to me. It really does.
Yeah. But that's we still have a livestock industry here that is actually alive and that actually uses horses. And I was reading this article, and I was going to mention to you, you might find that you have to get back into the horse thing just because the extortionists in charge are getting so awful with their licensing regime. And, it's the thing of being able to get the cattle to the market.
Really good point. Guineith, when we come back from this break, can you share with us what your thoughts are for someone who wants to begin farming and maybe get that first horse? What do we look for in our first horse? Guineith Isaac's with us, live from Australia. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaac's with us. She's a farmer, and she's living off the grid in Australia. Guineith, we've got a bunch of things to talk about, including mining bitcoins and actually where you live in Australia. I'm looking at a map. I'd like to talk about that. But why don't we first talk about the horse? So let's say someone wants to live as you and I live on farms and decides that they'd like to raise cows and do it the old-fashioned way, the traditional way, with a horse. What do you recommend that we do in looking for that first horse? What kind of equipment are we going to need? What do they cost to feed? And what about medicines and those kinds of things? What's it take to keep a horse? Okay.
Well, if you're going to have a horse, you need to either have a lot of land or a lot of money. Okay? There's just no getting around that. If you've got a farm, well, obviously you've got the land. You must have good fences, okay, because a horse is a very, very clever creature. And my horse, sometimes you'll put him in a paddock, okay, and if you don't put that extra little bit of string or chain or whatever on the gate, sometimes he will manage to get the gate open and decide to have a wander around the farm. And, and I'll know about it because I have a farm monitoring system, which is my pack of dogs. And if he gets out of his paddock and decides to have a wander around, the dogs absolutely go off their nana. And if the dogs go off their nana, then I'm going to go out and have a look what's the matter. And even if it's in the middle of the night, the dogs know that the horse is supposed to be in his paddock. They know that. They're smart, okay? And if he's out of the paddock, they They're not aggressive towards the horse. He's lived there for years. They've lived there for years. They're both part of the landscape. But they know that if the horse is out of this paddock, that's not right, and they're going to raise merry hell, and which is the idea is to get my attention. Mom, 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 mom. In the dog version, which somehow comes out like, something like that. If you're going to get your first horse, the best thing to do is take somebody with you to the place who knows about horses, who has had to do with horses for many, many, many years. Because it's not like you can pick up the knowledge of horses overnight. It's encyclopedic. And there's only really one way to gather knowledge about horses, and that's by being around them. Okay? That said, there are some things that you could look for. When you're going to buy your first horse, okay, you need to ask people who have the farm that you're buying the horse from, can they have the horse turned out so that you can see them go catch it? Because there's nothing more frustrating than chasing a horse around a paddock for half an hour or an hour with a piece of rope or a halter or whatever trying to catch it before you've got work to do. I've been there, and that is the most frustrating thing on earth to do. And, some horses just have that habit. They just don't want to be caught. And it wouldn't matter if they were in, a quarter acre, the size of a suburban block. They will play games and they will do all sorts of things. And like I say, you're looking at a very clever creature. And the primal relationship between humans and horses was originally not a friendly one. So there is a part of their brain that has to be trained out of seeing us as a predator and trained into seeing us as the leader of the herd. Okay, and that's what you've got to do. Is you've got to see that the horse can be caught easily.
Right.
Okay, we've got the music coming again, haven't we? In the background, no?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. We're talking about that first horse and what's it take to keep one. Guineith Isaacs, live from Australia. So, Guineith, we're talking about getting your first horse, and isn't this like purchasing a family member? Isn't this really like that? Because horses live a long time, and you really bond with a horse. Isn't it like doing that, selecting a family member?
Absolutely agree with that. Horses can live to be 25 years old. And typically, if you are looking at buying your first horse, you should not buy one that is under about 6 or 7 years old, because they're going to be too young. And, all of us, when we're young, we like to kick our heels up and do things we probably wouldn't do when we were older. And horses are no different. And so probably for your first horse, it should be somewhere between 7 and 15 years old. Okay? You tell the age of a horse from its teeth. Okay? So starting with you've got the horse in, the guy's managed to catch it, it's not a problem. The horse seems docile and friendly. And he has it tied up, and it's time to inspect it. Okay, you start at the head, okay, and you look at the eye of the horse. And the eye should be fairly large. There shouldn't be any signs of, you can tell from someone's eyes if they've been drugged or doped up. Okay, so if the eyes look drugged and doped up, and if you say, well, what does that look like? it looks the same as what it would look like in a human, except on a horse. So either, sleepy looking or overly dilated pupils, this sort of thing. That's a trick that a lot of unscrupulous people use if they've got a horse that's not, that's not a horse you would want to own, and they need to move it along. Instead of just calling up the dog food guy, they sometimes will try and move it on to some unsuspecting fool like you. That's unfortunate, but it's true, because there are bad people in the world. So the eye of the horse should look fairly large, alert, liquid, docile, like the eye of a docile cow. Okay? Mm-hmm. You should, when you see the eye of the horse, it should be paying attention to where you are, but it doesn't have to turn its head. Okay? But you should notice that it is noticing you. That's a good thing. Okay? It means that it's got a brain in its head. You should get its mouth and have a look at its teeth. Okay? With a horse that's between 7 and 15 years old, the teeth will, especially the front teeth, the front incisors get progressively longer as the horse ages. Okay? There shouldn't be any baby teeth left if it's a horse of that age. You can tell the baby teeth, they're smaller. Okay, but they have all their adult teeth by the time they're 5. And you look at the forehead, there'll be a dimple on each side of the forehead where the temples would be on your head. And as a horse ages, those dimples get progressively deeper. This is a simple way of telling how a horse is. But with a horse, there's 3 areas, okay, that are really, really going to be key into this being a good, manageable horse, and that is its head, its back, and its legs and feet, okay? You also need to make sure it's got good wind. You watch how it's breathing. It should be just a steady, inhalation, exhalation, just normal, not any wheezing, not any coughing, not any obvious sounds. Put your ear against its flank and have a listen to its lungs, and you should just hear normal sort of intestinal gurgles. You shouldn't hear any sort of rattling or anything in the lungs. Okay, you get your fingers. You've seen that the horse has got a good head. You give it a pat and you talk nice to it, and most horses, when you start to do that, will lift their head, pay attention to you, and if they want to be friends, they will move their nostrils around to face you. Okay? What they're doing is they're smelling your breath. Okay? And so what you can do to return the gesture is you can blow like that into their nostrils with your nose and talk gently to them, give them a bit of a stroke, touch them all around the head on all sides, because if the horse objects to its head being touched, okay, it means it's head shy and you're going to have trouble getting a bridle on it. Okay, so we'll assume that the horse has got a lovely good head. You see the neck should have a slight arch to it, okay. That's important because that's like the delivery system. You move along to the back, okay. That's the next important thing. You get your thumb and your first finger, and you put them each side of the horse's spine. You start at the shoulders, just where the neck meets the shoulders, and you run your fingers along the horse's spine, putting probably quite a bit of pressure along the horse's spine on each side. Okay, depending on your size and depending on your strength, you may actually have to use 2 hands. But you should be able to run your thumb and your first finger along each side of the horse's spine, putting pressure on all the way to its tail, without the horse jumping or flinching or twitching or anything like that. Okay? If you find that it flinches at a particular point, it means it's got a back problem, and that's an instant reject. Okay? Because back problems are very difficult to heal, and maybe the horse will be rideable for 2 or 3 years with the back problem, but you'll find after that it begins to get dangerous, that the horse begins to do things to try and get you off its back, because if you are on its back, it's causing it pain. Okay, it's not the horse's fault. Now, you assume that it's got a good back. Okay, the back should have a slight dip between the shoulders and the hips. If it's got an excessive dip, that's a reject. If it's overly straight, that's a reject. Both of them indicate a weak back, but a slight dip, and the best judge of that is just go on the internet and type in horse back, and you'll see. Okay, well, the back's good. Then what you do is you move on to the legs, and once again, you feel putting pressure along each leg all the way up and down, stroke them, and then getting both hands, wrap your hands around the horse's leg, and just put pressure on the muscle going down the horse's leg. The horse should accept this. When you get to the knee, put some pressure on the knee. The horse should accept this. And when you do this to the lower leg, most horses will want to lift the leg up. That's good. That means that you'll have no trouble shoeing it, okay? And what you do is you run your fingers on each side, on the inside, on the, the side of the horse, the side of the front leg that faces the horse's belly, or the side of the back leg that faces the horse's tail. I don't necessarily know the proper terms. I've just learnt this with 20 years of being with horses. You run your fingers down the back of the leg and the horse, and towards the bump that's near the hoof. It's called the fetlock, okay? And the horse should want to lift its leg and show you its hoof. And you pick up its hoof and you tell the horse what a good boy or good girl she is, okay? And you examine the hoof. The hoof should be quite hard, okay? It shouldn't be overgrown, and there shouldn't be any obvious cracks or splits or ridges. Now, most horses of that age, they will begin to, develop a few interesting-looking ridges on their feet, okay? Sometimes they develop into a problem, sometimes they don't, okay? But generally, horses lead interesting lives. Horses, their feet is their business, and if you don't have a foot, you don't have a horse. The main thing is that the hoof should be hard, and there shouldn't be any painful spots in the base of the hoof. You should be able to poke the base of the hoof quite hard with something like a stick or some other hard object, not excessively hard, but without the horse flinching, because this is what it does all the time. It puts its foot down on a stick or on a branch or on a rock, and it has to just be able to take the pressure of these normal objects pressing on the base of its feet. So the base of the feet need to be hard. The hoof should be at about a 45-degree angle, okay? That's the ideal angle to trim a foot at. If it's trimmed too short, so that the angle's too steep, it's going to be putting too much pressure on all the other joints all the way up the horse's leg. And feet can be grown out, but it's a nuisance. And that's not necessarily a reject, but it's something to say, maybe you want to think twice.
How much should we pay for this horse?
Well, it depends. for a schoolmaster, that's your absolutely best quiet horse. In this country, you can be expecting to
We're going
pay-
into a break. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. So, Guineith, how much should we pay for this this horse, this first horse between 7 and 15 years old?
Yep. I would say between $1,000 and $5,000. Okay, that's
Wow, that makes
probably
those
quite
free
similar in the U.S.
That makes those free horses that we were offered sound real good.
Well, you know
1 to
something?
5,000.
With the free horses, often what they are is they're off-the-track horses, okay? And I've been working with horses since I was about 14 or 15 years old, including a short stint that I had in a racing stable, and most of my horses have actually been off-the-track horses. My formal horse education is non-existent. I never went to riding schools or anything like that. I learnt from actually being around horses. And you'll find that there's actually a lot of really, really knowledgeable horse people who gathered their horse information in the same way. And, you know, I have books around here like Veterinary Notes for Horse Owners and the Complete Encyclopedia of the Horse. This sort of thing. And sometimes I'll just sit down for an hour or two and read the horse books, you know, and with a cup of tea and all the rest of it, especially if it tends to be a bit wet out and the kids are at school and it's a slow day on the card reading or whatever. That's, you know, you in any form of preparedness, if you haven't got a library with a lot of these sorts of books in them, then you're not really on the path of preparedness, because the internet can go out, okay? You can pick up books these days for practically nothing about a bunch of different topics. And they can sit on your shelf, or you can, you know, make a point of reading them for about an hour or so a day. But the free horses, okay, you have to think, where has this horse come from? Because I've had free horses, and some of them have been great, and some of them I've had to, you know, move on again after a while because they just had some really, really interesting habits. I remember one horse that was a off-the-track, you know, harness racer, and this particular horse, you would get on it, and it had learnt that if it got down on its knees and rolled, that you would get off its back pretty quick. That's not the sort of horse you want.
You know, I've noticed,
it was also frightened of wire, which was also a problem. Yeah,
I've noticed looking at images of people on horses on the internet. I've got a bunch of them in front of me. And there's a couple common threads that I can see. One is it looks like the experienced riders of horses, people who have been, that you can just see who have been around them for quite a while, wear blue jeans. They wear, you know, they're not wearing shorts and bikinis, the people who, you know, have been around them for a long time. Right?
Yeah.
And then you look at these neophytes, or they appear to be neophytes, who are wearing bikinis, and there's no protection for them if they get thrown or fall off.
Yeah. If you are going to have a horse, you are going to fall off. That's part of the package, okay? And if you are going to be around horses, you must have, although I break this rule all the time because I wear bare feet on my farm all the time, but ideally you need to have closed-in, preferably leather shoes, okay? And preferably one with a slight heel. The reason why shoes even have heels in the first place is because they were made first designed back in the day when everybody had horses And if you're going to put your foot in the stirrup, the heel is there to stop your foot from slipping through the stirrup, and it's there to stop you getting dragged.
Great education today, Guineith. You'll be back hour number 2. We're going into top of the hour break. Hour number 2, we're going to be talking about bitcoins and an airplane crash, a charter airplane crashing into a factory outlet. Everyone on the plane was killed. We'll talk about that. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live from Australia. And if you'd like to find her, you can go to usaprepares.com. Page number 1, there's a link to her Facebook page. And if you'd like to go to the Instructors tab, there's a link at usaprepares.com, the Instructors tab. And you can contact Guineith. Guineith, is there another way that you'd like to share that we can contact you?
No, I think that's about it for the moment. I am going to get a web page together, but you know, there's only a certain number of projects you can work on at any one time without, you know, overdoing it. So,
Sure.
But when I get the web page together, I will certainly give the details here. The other, just for just about half a minute, there's one more thing I have to mention about horses. They are a hole that you put money down, and there's no getting away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If you're going to keep one horse, you have to make sure that you have, to be safe, a spare $100 a week income to maintain that horse, okay? It may not cost that some weeks. Other weeks it may cost a lot more, okay? And if you are keeping it in, in stables, I'm not sure what they call them in the US, but if you're keeping it on somebody else's ranch in a stable at a horse ranch, you can probably save $200, okay, because the ranch fees, they can get quite expensive. What you've also got to be aware of is the tack, okay, the saddle, the bridles, and all of that. Just to start with, you better budget at least $300 to $500 for a good new set of tack, okay? The reason why I say a new set of tack is it's not going to have problem. If you get second-hand tack, although I've bought a lot of second-hand tack, if you're going to buy second-hand tack, you've got to know what you're looking for. If you're going to buy new tack, then you can be pretty sure that it's going to be good, okay? And actually buy the tack from one of these saddle stores that you get, and I'm sure they have them in the US. There's shops out there, and all they sell is horse stuff. And the best, safest way, if you're brand new to horses, is go into the tack shop and find out what sort of bit the horse has been using, okay? If it's your very first horse, the horse should take a snaffle bit, okay? That's the very softest kind of bit, and it means that the horse's mouth is very manageable. If it takes anything other than a snaffle bit, then for a first horse, I would say that's a reject, okay? There are, there's a dozen different kinds of bit, but a snaffle bit is your standard ordinary bit that has a join in the middle and 2 round bits on each end, okay? And, and place for a single set of reins to go out to the side, round the back of the horse's neck and around to the other ring on the other side of the bit, okay? Anyway, there we go. That's it about horses for now. I think that's enough knowledge for anyone to get started.
I had a comment. Looking at these images on the internet, I've noticed that there are lots of pictures of ladies riding horses, and the experienced ones you can tell because they're wearing, long pants, blue jeans, long sleeves most of the time, I guess, unless it's really, really hot weather. But what I've noticed is I think every single one of these ladies that looks experienced riding a horse has long hair. Every one.
Yep.
Why is that?
Yep. You'll usually find that it's up. I think
But they have long hair.
It comes with the mindset, I think.
Okay.
You know, that these are real women. If you are, the thing is that horses are not very good at putting up with political bullshit. So if you're a social justice warrior, feminist type, I might be wrong. Maybe there probably is someone out there in the listening audience who's heavily into political activity on the left wing and is into horses, and good for you, and I'm very happy for you. But you'll find that your horses even do not put up well with your social justice warrior bullshit. I'm sorry for the language.
I've got to be careful with the language, Guineith.
I'm very sorry.
Okay, so that was my question. Now I'm looking, before we get into mining bitcoins, which I'd really like to do, I'm looking at a map of Australia, and I'm sure a lot of those in class today with us would love to know where in Australia you live. I'm looking at, to the north, there's Darwin. To the east, there's Brisbane. And then to the south, there's Melbourne, and to the west, there's Perth. Where are you?
We are in the southwest corner of the continent. So it's southeast. Sorry, it's like 3 a.m. here. The southeastern corner of the continent is the state of Victoria. Okay? And we live probably around about 300 kilometres from Melbourne, which is the capital of Victoria. Okay, that's the state capital. And if you went northwest, roughly, probably about 300 kilometres, you would get to an area which actually is not, it's not even on a lot of weather maps and that sort of thing. Usually we have to get our weather reports for a town called Bendigo, which has got about 120,000 people living there. That's the nearest really, really big town. And we're about 80 kilometres west from there. It's a semi-arid climate, okay? Just about 50 kilometres or 60 kilometres to the south of us, maybe 70, there's a line. Okay, there's a mountain range, which is called the Grampians. South of that, you get Melbourne-type weather, which is actually warm temperate. North of that, you get a semi-arid climate. And this mountain range called the Grampians actually wraps around up it runs more or less parallel to the Australian south and east coast, all the way up to Queensland in something called the Great Dividing Range. And you'll find that on the seaward side of that mountain range, they get high rainfall. On the landward side, the further you go into the centre of the continent, generally the drier it gets. In the middle of the continent, you have some of the driest country on earth, where it's pure desert, and they might get 100 or 150 millimetres of rain in a year, and it might all fall in just one day. That's the climate in Australia. We're not quite, that's fully arid. Semi-arid, you're going to get between 300 and 500 millimetres of rain in a regular year, okay? And the evaporation is going to be probably about 1,200 millimetres, okay? That's how you tell if it's a semi-arid climate or if it's an arid climate, because, or if it's a temperate climate. If it's a temperate climate, then your rainfall will be more than the evaporation, okay? So that if you could imagine, it's like a bank account where you've got constantly money going in, money going out. And if you've got more money going in than goes out, then things are a lot easier. That's your temperate climate. But if there's always a struggle with the money coming in and there's always expenses going out, that's your semi-arid climate. Okay? So you've got high evaporation, low rainfall, means semi-arid. And that is true the whole world over. And that's a very important thing to remember when you're looking at buying land. And you might buy land somewhere, like I said, like somewhere like Arizona, Four Corners, or something like that, and think that it's wonderful, but you've got to bear in mind this is an arid or a semi-arid climate, and you have got to be aware that you have to do things in a skillful way or you are not going to survive. And none of it happens without the water.
All very, very good points. No question about it.
Yeah.
Ready to talk about Bitcoin mining?
Yes, I've actually been wanting to talk about this for a while, okay? I've actually been following the Bitcoin thing for probably about 7 or 8 years. At the end of last year, I actually splashed out and invested in a Bitcoin mine, okay? Now, how Bitcoin works is this. There's a certain set of equations, okay, that the computer has to solve, okay? And if anyone out there is aware of a game called Minecraft, okay, in that game you've got to go out with your little pickaxe and you've got to bash a certain number of blocks in the game until you get to an emerald in the game, okay? When you've got an emerald in the game, you can take that emerald to the villages in the game and you can buy something, like cabbages or tomatoes or wood or whatever you might need that the villagers have. Now, Bitcoin mining works very much like that.
We're talking about Bitcoin mining, and we're going to learn how this works. Guineith is doing the Bitcoin mining off-grid in Australia. You were describing Minecraft, the game, and its relationship to Bitcoin mining. Please continue, Guineith.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's about how the algorithm within the Bitcoin mining software works, okay? But the difference is that it's all automated, okay? There's no little guy with a graphic screen in the computer game like there is in Minecraft, but this is how I describe it to help people conceptually get their mind around. So it all happens with equations inside the computer, and that's just how it is. Now, with my Bitcoin mining, instead of me actually doing it from home here, because if I was going to be operating a Bitcoin mine, the prime thing that a Bitcoin mine needs is it needs a constant supply of electricity. You cannot do Bitcoin mining at home if you live off the grid, because your electrical supply is not reliable enough, okay? And these Bitcoin mining computers are high-powered and they are hungry. If you are going to do Bitcoin mining at home, when the whole Bitcoin thing first started, it probably would have been, you would have been able to solve the equations on your desktop computer at home, okay, provided that you had a constant supply of electricity. You can't do that now because the equations are just too complicated. And you'll have to have your computer running for 3 or 4 months just to mine 1 Bitcoin, okay? And, I researched this absolutely thoroughly before I went and splashed out. I was researching it for 6 or 7 years, actually. So Bitcoin mining at home is not really a viable option these days unless you have an absolutely regular supply of dirt cheap electricity that and unless you practically never have blackouts or brownouts, okay? Because otherwise you'll be like 29 days or, 60 days into the cycle, and you know that on the 65th day there's going to be a Bitcoin generated, and then you get to day 64 and there's a blackout. Your entire sequence of calculations that your computer has done is lost. And you can't do that. So how I do my Bitcoin mining is with a company that I basically buy the computers from them, and they set it up for me. They run it for me. Okay, they have their Bitcoin mining farms all over the world, but mostly in Iceland, because the Icelandic people are absolutely marvelous. They have an abundance of very, very cheap electricity that they generate using hydrothermal energy. Okay, so basically, and I grew up in Rotorua in New Zealand, and outside of Rotorua, they generate a certain proportion of their electricity in this way as well. It's cheap, it's abundant, it's going to last forever unless your volcano erupts. That's the only thing that'll wipe out a hydrothermal bore, or, of course, poor maintenance. Okay, but the Icelandic people have had to absolutely struggle for 1,000 years since they've been there just to live in their harsh climate. And they do not put up with second-rate ways of doing things. It's not in their culture. Because if you don't do things properly in Iceland, you're going to die. The climate is that harsh. Okay?
Hold that thought.
We're heading into
We're going
break. All right.
Another break. And we'll continue the discussion about Bitcoin mining. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Link on the website, usapreparedness.com. She lives off the grid in Australia, and she is using a service so that she can mine Bitcoins. Guineith, so please continue. We've got about 25 minutes.
Okay. Well, this company is called BitClub, okay? And they don't just accept anyone. You've got to have a BitClub member sponsor you in order to become a BitClub member. But if anyone wants to go to my BitClub site, which is www.bitclub.network/Guineith. That's Guineith. Okay, and you'll see that there is a free member, a leads and free members area where you can go type in your email address, and you'll have to verify it, of course, and it will let you into the site for you to have a look around and so that you can begin to do some due diligence and actually study how this operates. Now, of course, there are other Bitcoin miners out there, okay? The difference with the BitClub is that you actually own the mining hardware, okay? Most other Bitcoin miners, you lease the, computing power of the machine. But with the BitClub, you actually buy the machine, and they take it and they install it into their facility, and it works in parallel with quite literally hundreds of other Bitcoin mining computers. Okay, and so it's just an enormous amount of hashing power is the technical term that they use. Computing power to to keep generating Bitcoin. And what you can do, once you've got your Bitcoin mine, is you can select how much of the proceeds of that mine you want to have paid out each day into your Bitcoin wallet, and how much you want to have for buying partial shares. That means basically paying off another Bitcoin mining computer, okay? So you have a partial share, and then they pull the partial shares, and then when you get enough partial shares to get a full share, then apparently, this is as far as I know, I might be, but as far as I can understand it, this is how it works, and then you get another full share, okay? Now, with regards to how I personally, I'm not offering financial advice here, by the way. It's up to everybody out there. God put a brain in your skull. He meant for you to go and use it. I've been researching this topic for 7 or 8 years, and of course it's impossible to put all of that information into 25 minutes of radio time, okay? So, but what I can say is this: with the Bitcoin mining, if you put the buyback up to 100%, so that initially, if you could imagine that your Bitcoin mine is like a fruit tree, you have to get the fruit tree to a certain size before it starts making lots of fruit, okay? If you stress the tree, if you keep picking leaves off the tree before it gets to that certain size, then it's never going to get to be a big tree. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Well, that's what a Bitcoin mine is like. If you initially set the, buyback to 100%, so that 100% of your Bitcoin goes back into buying more mining software, okay? Sorry, hardware. Goes back into buying more mining hardware, then your Bitcoin mine will grow a lot more quickly. And you'll find that it actually begins to have a logarithmic curve upwards. And if you buy the Bitcoin mine and then set it to 100% repurchase and you may only need to do this for like 6 months of a 1,000-day contract. Okay, the initial Bitcoin mine is active for 1,000 days, and all of the partial shares also are active for 1,000 days. And that is because computers, they get outdated. They need to be replaced, okay? And they actually do wear out. There actually are electrons whizzing around on the inside of them, and it does wear them out, okay? And that's the reason why. But you'll find that very soon you've got, if you could picture it as a big Bitcoin tree that just constantly drops Bitcoins for you. That's about the best visual image that I could give. My personal Bitcoin mine, okay, I have been graphing it out. I will post an image. I've actually got it in a school exercise book. So, but I'll scan the picture of the graph and I'll post it on my Facebook page, and you'll begin to see the logarithmic curve developing. Okay, when it gets to a certain size, when it gets to that it's generating the amount of Bitcoin that you like, then you pull back the repurchase to maybe 50% or however much, so that the mine keeps growing, but you're actually beginning to reap a harvest on it. And this is certainly worthwhile, even in just the value of the Bitcoin alone. When I first began to think about purchasing the mine last July, seriously, Bitcoins were $400 each, okay? And, of course, past returns are not a guarantee of future returns, and this is not financial advice. I need to say that constantly, yada, yada, yada. But last July it was $400. When I bought the Bitcoin mine in October, it was $700 or $800. And now, today, I think that Cliff High said that it actually got to 1,000, or somebody was reporting that they had a webbot hit. I checked the mine yesterday, it was 1,048 yesterday. It might have been a spike overnight to $1,080. And, you know, that is, it's obviously something that's worth having. The Chinese government has just announced in the last month or so that they are now going to be recognising Bitcoin as an official currency, and currently that's where most of the world's Bitcoins are ending up. They are ending up in China. And the stated aim that the Chinese have broadcast in their latest 5-year plan is for every Chinese village to have at least one Bitcoin for the benefit of the village, so that they have capital that they need to spend on maybe things like bridges, dams and roads, and for the maintenance of these things, and electrical supplies and such and so forth. And do you know something? I think that if every one of us treats our own household as one of these little villages and begins to operate as our own, you know, I can't remember who said it, but somebody wealthy once said, every wealthy person knows that the secret to maintaining wealth is to be your own bank, okay? That means you have to have capital reserves. And I have, you know, I believe that it's a really good idea to have some precious metals, okay? But the disadvantage of that is, and I recently explained this actually to this coin dealer, he was opposed to Bitcoin. And I said, well, I've got a Bitcoin mine. And he says, I think you've done the wrong thing. And I said, it's like this. You're shutting your shop in a month or so. And I'm not going to be able to get precious metal after that time unless I want to buy them online and have them sent through the post, or unless I want to do a 300-kilometre trek every time on public transport to go to Melbourne to buy precious metal. And I still have to have a way of generating and storing wealth, because nobody ever becomes wealthy in this world unless they have a way of A, generating, and 2, keeping wealth, okay? And it's very, very difficult to do anything in this life if you do not have adequate wealth. And that is the number one thing that leads to people's preparedness plans failing, is that they run out of finances.
You're absolutely correct. Currently, the price of Bitcoin is $1,105.40.
Wow.
1105.40 US dollars.
Yep.
That's the current price. Guineith,
Yep.
what did, if you think this is personal, please don't answer, but my question is, what did it cost for you to get into this, and where do you think you are net right now?
Okay. I'll answer that after the break.
Yep, let's talk about that after the break.
Okay.
Guineith Isaacs, live from Australia. She's a farmer, lives off the grid. She knows a lot about a lot, and she's sharing it with us. We'll be right back. Class, if you'd like to get to Guineith's Facebook page, there's a link at usaprepares.com, page number 1. Also, you can click on the instructors tab at usaprepares.com, and she's listed there. Guineith, you were going to share with us what it took to get into Bitcoin mining and where you are net after your investment.
Okay.
Please, don't share anything that you don't want to share.
Okay, no, that's fine. I have to say, okay, first of all, this is a disclosure that the people that I sponsor into the big club, okay, I do actually get paid a commission for sponsoring people into the big club, okay? The people that I sponsor don't pay that directly. I get the payment from big club, okay? But I have to say that. It's just disclosure. And also, the mining earnings that I earn, a portion of that goes to, it's like, it operates on a similar system to multi-level marketing, okay? So of my mining earnings, there's a certain portion that goes to my upline, and the people that I sponsor in, a certain number of their Bitcoin earnings goes to me, okay? So that's, and also, like I say, it's only fair that I tell people that, but it still is worthwhile because the earnings, because these commissions are actually paid from the Bit Club, you don't notice them going out of your mining earnings, okay? But because I've actually been putting 100% of my mining earnings into building the mine, then I'm not actually getting an income of Bitcoin at this time from my Bitcoin mine. But what is happening is that since last October, when the Bitcoin mine, when I began it, I have earned about I've earned about 0.13 of a Bitcoin mine share. That's around about a sixth of a mine share in about, in about 112, 114 days. Okay? And to get into Bitcoin mining with the Bit Club, the upfront expenses are around about $600. Okay? That's a one-time $99 membership fee that's only ever paid once, and the minimum purchase is for one Bitcoin mine, and that is $500. Okay, and like I say, you can choose. That's the very basic, and you can choose to have more mines than that. You can buy packages of 2 and packages of 3 and such like, depending on how much money you have to put into the project. But because we are starting from quite a low level around here because we live out in the middle of nowhere and the cops aren't letting me drive my car, and I've got other sorts of, hardship as well, and, all this. It's, we're starting from a low level, but that's, about 0.13 to 0.16 of a mine. That's about a sixth of a mine share. Okay? So that would have earned about a 10% return over those 112, 115 days.
When would you expect to break even? In about a year or less?
Okay, I would say much less than a year. Okay, I would anticipate, given the slope of the curve, probably within 6 months, I anticipate being able to break even. And the contract's a 1,000-day contract.
We're out of time. We're out of time, Guineith. Thanks so much for being with us. See you next Tuesday.